that's it. That's all the intro I got, because we got a lot of stuff to cover today. Now, the first story I'm going to talk about is a little grim, but I have this thing that I really am starting to think that most of history has been retconned. I think the Battle of the Bulge happened and stuff like that. And I think there were key events that happened throughout humanity, but sometimes the stuff that is reported is so ridiculous that you really have to sit back and go, that didn't happen. Now, there are some events that actually we know 100% happen, but for this first story, though, that I just find absolutely ridiculous. So let's hop in the Carpenter copter. First, we got to make a stop off at the Bermuda Triangle because we're going back in time, so... And now, we are also magically transported over Transylvania. Modern-day Romania, but back then it had the more badass name, Transylvania. And we get there just as things are starting to heat up, pun intended. In 1514... This dude, to make a long story short, because I don't want to get into the history of everything, but there was a papal order? There was an order from the Pope to stop the Ottomans from just wrecking all this stuff throughout Eastern Europe. And they appointed this dude, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing this wrong, because if I'm pronouncing this right, this guy does not have a badass name. His name is György Dózsa. György Dózsa. So anyways, easy Dózsa. Oh, okay, I'm sorry about that. György is appointed to raise this army, and he does raise an army, but he doesn't know how to control them. And eventually, he has this huge army, and they go, let's fight for our rights. Let's take back the land that was ours. And all, the gentry are like, uh-oh, this isn't good. They're like, control your army, control your army. He's like, I'm trying to. There's, thousands of these guys. What am I supposed to do? Maybe if you gave me some of that sweet, sweet vampire power you have in Transylvania. And they're like, silence. And so anyways, this army that was meant to stop the Ottoman Empire, to stop the Turks, was just rampaging. And this went on for a while, and they were basically killing a bunch of noblemen, and the knights were having to show up and beat up the peasants. And the whole time, György just cannot control this whole mob. It's a mob. So anyways, eventually, the quote-unquote rebellion that's not even why he started it, was crushed. And they tell György, they go, you want to be king? You want to take stuff over? We'll make you king. And he's like, I never wanted to be king. I was given this order to do this, and it didn't work out. But anyway, so that's all. I believe all of that happened. I don't believe that his name is György. I think it was probably a little more badass than that. But anyways, this is what I don't believe. So this is how they kill György. Now, I know back in time, they were pretty brutal with their tortures, but let me explain it to you and then explain why I don't think it's real. They take György, and they take a throne, and they make it red hot. And then they put him in it. And they're like, you want to be king, right? Sit in this throne. And he's like, ah! And then they make a crown, a crown that you put on your head, because I know I have trouble pronouncing that word. They make that red hot, and they go, here's your crown, your highness. And he's like, ah! And then they go, you know what a king really needs? He needs a scepter. Go fetch me that hot red scepter, please, that they just have lying around. Guy's like, yeah, sure. Puts on big mittens, hands it to György. Oh, now he's holding a red hot scepter, sitting in a red hot throne, wearing a red hot crown. Now, this is all supposedly historical. And you're like, well, that's awful, Jason. That's terrible. But then, according to historians, they then were starving 9 dudes. They were prisoners of war that György knew. One of them was his brother. And they bring the 9 dudes in. And they go, György, here's your court. Look at all these people here are to serve the new king. And then they chop his brother up. And György's like, no! And then the remaining 8 guys who are starved to death, they are then told to eat György. So they eat him. They begin taking bites out of him. And those that refused got chopped up, so the other dudes are like, well, I'm either getting chopped up or I'm taking a bite out of this guy, so they all walked up and ate some of them, and they were allowed to leave. And György died. That was the end of that. I don't believe that story for a second. And here's why. Let's say that someone has a spear on you and says, go sit in that red hot seat. What are you going to do? You'd be like, no, spear me then, dude. And they would have to, like, fight you, and maybe they're, like, poking you in the butt, and you're like, ah! And they finally throw you on the throne, and you're immediately going to get up. If someone, and here's the other thing. So I don't believe that. If you are standing around, if you are surrounded by guards, because obviously they would have to guard you, otherwise you would keep jumping up. There's a bunch of guards around you, and they hand you a red-hot scepter. What's the first thing you're going to do? Drop it, most likely. But if you have any forethought, you're going to begin wielding that like a mace and attacking people with a red-hot scepter. It's already melted to your hand. You can't do anything to it. It's like someone took a G.I. Joe figure and put it in a microwave. It's just one form of mold now, your hand and the scepter. Be swinging it around. And you could argue, well, Jason, maybe they strapped him down to the throne and then made it red-hot. What strap can you name that won't melt under red-hot heat, other than a chain? And again, even if they chained me to a chair and then handed me a red-hot scepter, I'm getting somebody. The guy who hands it to me is getting hit in the head with it. And then getting eaten while you're sitting in a red-hot chair. Have you ever tried to eat a hamburger out of a frying pan while it's still cooking? You would melt. I mean, this story's so ridiculous. But apparently this happened. I think they probably took a guy and they got a chair that was red hot and they threw him on it, and he jumped up and he got like third-degree burns, and then they just stuck him to death with spears. And then they made the rest up. Not saying that the historians today are like, hey Barry, wouldn't this be cool if we'd say that this guy got melted and eaten at the same time? But I think that it was probably propaganda back then. And they're like, and then we put a red-hot crown on his head, and all the revolutionaries were like, oh, I don't want to do that. That sounds like a terrible thing. But I think if you ever tried to recreate that, and I don't recommend doing it, because again, you're going to get hit in the head with a red-hot scepter, but I think, what's bizarre is that when I read about it, no one was like, but that's impossible, that probably didn't happen. A couple different sources are like, yeah, this happened. And I'm like, it didn't. I can understand getting impaled, because you could have a couple guys hold you down and a stick stuck up your butt. But the amount of people it would take to hold a man down in a red-hot chair, those dudes are getting burnt, and there's a big struggle, and they're handing you a weapon that is red-hot. It's just a bad idea all around. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.